Well, good morning. Here we are once more.
All right, episode 36, right?
Episode 36. Here we are.
36th time.
Here we are. Yes, 36 weeks. That is, it felt weird. Actually, it felt weird to say that, but it has been 36 weeks of doing this podcast.
Yeah. I remember when we were sitting in there trying to, how long would we be able to do this? And so Here we are, 36. I don't know. I guess 100 is a big milestone. So
that would be, and it will be.
I don't see why we wouldn't get there unless Jesus comes back.
Yeah. We don't know where we'll be during that time either, but. Physically.
We're going to figure that out, aren't we?
Yep. Interesting and exciting things happening here at the Well Church in Brighton, Michigan. And yes, this is the Well Overflow podcast for those of you who are tuning in or checking in on our Audible only sources out there. So we're thankful for you guys for hearing us and not seeing us.
Yeah. Maybe they get the better part of our
Exactly. Who knows? It's hard. Who's that now? It enters the room.
Yes, we have to talk in our radio voice.
Yes, that's right. So, it's great to be here. And for those who are listening just on the audio sources, this is the voice of Andy Ferguson. And next to me is Pastor Jeff Waterman.
This is the Jeff Waterman voice.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's great. And so we are overflowing from this previous weekend's Sunday sermon, the second of our services so far of our new fall sermon series, which has been Problem or Promise.
Right.
And the focus then is, what are you focusing on in your lives? Are you focusing on the many problems or the many promises that, we're going to say the promises of God, they trump all of your problems?
Yeah. I think it's real easy. I think that's easy to ask, so what are you focusing on, problem or promise? I think if we're all honest with ourselves, when we're in the midst of a trial or a problem, it does loom larger than anything because it's right here smack in front of us, right? So,
right, yeah.
It's not to diminish what a problem is, but more how to, when we get into those moments, how do we make it through them and come out on the other side and then learn from them? There's
If you're not learning from the problem, then there's a good chance you're going to face that one again, right?
And we're going to see that as we go through this. There's Abram obviously failed this week, and he'll get a chance to do almost exactly the same thing again, and we'll see how he does.
Yeah, that has been a very interesting thing for me, and throughout my biblical studies over all the years, a lot of the similarities of the Israelites and then the Jews and then the Gentiles, everybody kind of facing the same things over and over and over. And we get a lot of that with like the first Adam, and then we get the last Adam in Jesus, and the first this, that, and the other, and then, yeah.
Well, and this is going to be a shameless plug that just came in, but we announced one of our Equip workshops, Learn, is coming up in October. And the purpose of that is to give ourselves a tool. We believe there's a tool that helps us extract the learning from these problems or these moments we call kairos moments, right? These things that happen in our lives that grab our attention. So we don't have to repeat them. We can extract the learning, and then we get different lessons taught. But sometimes I think we get through stuff, and our goal is to just get through. And then once we get through it, it's like, okay, now I'm going to enjoy the good times. And we don't take a minute and step back and go, but what did I need to learn from that? Or what do I need to learn as I'm walking through that?
Yeah, I'll be honest, working within a church, for those of you who have had that opportunity, there are differences of that versus working in a corporate environment and atmosphere. And where I'm going with this is something that I learned that I think people in other atmospheres should do more often, that I learned that we do here, and that you, as a leader, Pastor Jeff, you emphasize and you really are intentional about pressing us as your staff into this, is a debrief time after almost any activity or engagement. It's like, how did that go? What do we learn from this? How can we kind of just like review and reflect upon what just happened?
Yeah, what can we take forward? I think a lot of times in our culture, we're like, put that behind us and now let's just move forward, which is good. We want to move forward, but we want to move forward in intentionality because there's what just happened that I need to learn, that I need to discover about myself, about my organization, about how to do that thing that I was just doing, whether it's a Sunday morning worship service, a special event, something with family, whatever it is, that event, that time. What do I need to learn so that I can move forward with intention?
Right. Yeah. Very important. And so what that takes in terms of the result of that debrief, the result of the review, the result of being intentional, as you were just saying, is that our vision and our perspective of what's happening around us has a chance to shift.
Yeah, I would imagine that, we were talking about Abram and Sarai in going to Egypt after he's been told, here's the land that I'm going to give to your descendants. And then he goes to Egypt and, he compromises the truth and all of that. And I think if we could get in a DeLorean and go all the way back in time and talk to Abram now in chapter 13, and we ask him, so what'd you learn from the whole Egypt thing? His vision might be different than when it was entering into it. He learned a lot about himself, learned a lot about God, learned a lot about people.
Yep.
So, does he have the tool? Did he have the tool to extract the learning from it?
Absolutely. And I will do a little bit of catch up for those who are maybe tuning in. This is your first week joining us, but we do tend to talk about the previous Sunday's message here on the following podcast episode. So we are talking about right now the message that was on September 14th, and the title was Promise Has Ramifications, where we've been focusing in on the story or the call of Abram, and now we're continuing that story in Genesis 12, verses 5 through 20 was this previous Sunday, where now Abram with his wife Sarai, they're about to be entering into Egypt. Now, we also mentioned some of this like reoccurring symbolism and things going on. They're going to Egypt because there was a famine in the land. Right. And they were, so Abram he's being a nomad. He's a sojourner. He's a traveler right now with his group of his small group of people. And it's interesting. They're going through the wilderness, and perhaps he and the people that are with him are grumbling for food. They're grumbling for provision. Maybe there's a faith thing going on here where, well, it seems like Egypt is a place that's plentiful. Instead of doing what God has called me to do by traveling until maybe he lets me know where we're going, let's take this detour. We're going to go to Egypt and we're going to be there.
Yeah, I read some commentators as I was prepping that they thought that the act of going to Egypt was a failure of faith.
That's what I'm saying.
Abram. It doesn't say that God was mad at Abram for going to Egypt, right?
Right.
God didn't say, I'm going to show you this land and you have to stay there, come, thick or thin. Yep. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a failure of faith. But I did read one that I thought was really interesting. They said one of the things that we don't read here that perhaps led to the further failure of Abram while in Egypt was we don't have anything recorded where we see Abram sitting down and saying, okay, God, you told me that this is what the land you're going to give to my descendants. We're in famine.
Yeah.
So, what would you have me do?
Exactly.
Should I stay or should I go to Egypt to feed my family and then return? Mm-hmm. There was no sense of that dialogue, and I think one of the things that happens is we trust God with the big picture, right? But sometimes, all right, well, maybe you didn't see the famine coming.
Yeah.
And we'd say, all right, I got to take care of the nitty gritty.
Right. All of a sudden, whoops, I got to provide for my family. I got to make sure that we have enough to eat and so on. And so instead of asking God what he would like in the situation, as you just mentioned, or for the provision from God or the faith that maybe even from heaven, he will drop down quail or bring birds to bring us meat or whatever he's done that time and time again. Not yet in the Bible, but in the future he will have. Instead of doing that, he goes, well, we're going to go to this civilization that already has those things and we'll find our path there.
Yeah.
And
so
go ahead.
I kind of don't see this as a failure of faith, more as a failure of prayer.
Okay, yeah. And it is interesting, like you said, we don't get the back and forth between him and God being maybe perturbed or angry or frustrated. We don't see that. So I'm just kind of reading into it a little bit.
And usually, though, when Scripture says that when God's mad, it tells us. Like he was earlier in Genesis 6, it says, and God was sorry he made man. And then later when the Israelites build the golden calf, he says, step aside, and God's anger burned against them. Mm-hmm. When Moses was saying, I don't want to go to Pharaoh, I'm slow of speech, and all of a sudden it says, and God's anger burned against Moses. So when God is upset or when God is angry, the Bible's not shy of saying it. So I tend to look at that pattern and say, well, it didn't say God was upset or frustrated with Abram. I'm not going to read that he was. I'm just going to read
Sure.
that this is what happened.
Yeah. So I do find the correlations interesting, of course. Whenever the Bible speaks of wilderness and things like that, we read later on with all of the laws and what Moses and his people had to do with the scapegoat and things along
Right.
that nature, send it out to Azazel in the wilderness
Right.
as a sin offering
Sure.
or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we see times when the wilderness is that desolate, difficult place where a challenge happens, and then the people of God have some sort of a response opportunity. So here, yes, I'm reading into it a little bit, saying, okay, he could either have had that discussion with God or not, the provision or not. Later on, we see the Israelites again in the wilderness. They're also grumbling for food. There's no food in the wilderness, folks, and no matter what time of year it seems,
Well, yeah. I mean, there's always food in the wilderness. There's always animals and there's always stuff growing, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, there's a lot of people that live in the wilderness and learn to eat off the stuff. Now, for the Israelites, 2+ million people, that's a lot of food. But yeah, in this case, sure, famine's coming, and we see Elijah have a famine, and ravens bring him food, right? I mean,
Right,
it's like,
right.
So, but the difference with Elijah and Abram is Elijah was in conversation with God, and
Exactly.
God says, go here, do this, and that's what he does. We just don't get any sense that God said to Abram, go to Egypt.
Right, exactly. So what I was getting to, though, is we see the stories repeating of times in the wilderness and how we respond to those choices. And then Jesus in Matthew 4 was the perfect response to a time spent in the wilderness for a long time. And then what happened there with the temptations and how he responded as, again, this is the way to go through the wilderness times.
Man doesn't live on bread alone, right?
And he was relying on the promises of God to open up his vision, to have a better or a higher perspective on the challenges around him and in response to the temptations that Satan brings.
Yeah.
And so what we're saying here as your first point in the sermon is that we need to rely on God's promises. In order to know the promises, we need to know into the Word what his promises are, and that does change our perspective so we can perhaps say, okay, we have, God, you have the bigger picture in mind, and your thoughts are not my thoughts. Your ways are not my ways. You see more than we do. So let's remember what you've done. Let's remember who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. And then Jesus, we took communion on Sunday, and that he basically says that, right? Do this in remembrance of. Remember. Let this serve as a reminder. And we talked about Abram's altar that he built, and do we build altars? Are there things in our lives that we do so that we can be intentional about remembering not just what God's promises are, but how they came to be, how they came to fruition in our lives. And because if we don't, man, it's easy to forget.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked one of the practical examples that you gave to us on Sunday, which is to remember remember the ways that God has worked in your life and all the times that he's come through in situations where maybe you've seen it as this really tough situation, strife, challenge, whatever. It's there's dread, anxiety, etc. And then, well, God did whatever it was, and 10 years later you go, well, that thing didn't kill me, right? So you can look back and and the practical way that you gave to us was a simple prayer journal, a spiritual journal, a walk with God journal.
Just opportunities. Some people do it by year. They buy a new one every year, and they make sure that there's at least 365 pages in it. And I remember when I was introduced to journaling, I was a little intimidated. Like, do I got to write this big long paragraph? And I mean, I looked at some people's journals. They would show it to me, and I'm like, I'm never gonna write that much. And so, not that that's bad, but if that's you, that's great. But it got intimidating to me.
Sure.
It wasn't until I had a spiritual formation professor actually talk about journaling, and he's the one that said, "Hey, just ask yourself a couple of questions. What are you looking forward to today? What's kind of freaking you out? What are you anxious about? And then what's on your mind that you want to share with God that you're struggling with? And then at the end of the day, all right, how did that thing go that you were excited about? How did the thing go that you were anxious about?
Yeah.
Right? How has God spoke to you about that thing? And it'll be interesting because sometimes you go, I haven't heard anything from God. And that might go for days or weeks. And then all of a sudden it's like, And then you can write it down, and you can. The other thing that's good with that is if you write, "Hey, I haven't heard anything today," that's okay, because sometimes in the middle of problems, in the middle of trials, you need to know that, hey, I'm not going to wake up in the morning and pray, and necessarily the answer to that prayer comes by the end of the day. It might take days, it might take weeks, it might take months, it might take years. Yeah. So, but when you see those time frames in there, it helps you remind you that, hey, right now I'm not hearing anything, but like the song Waymaker, even when I don't see you, even when I don't hear you, I know you're working.
Exactly. And being able to be honest about the time frame from when you pray to whatever the answer might be, and then you don't see him working along the way, it gives you a deeper understanding into how God works. And like, wow, I didn't see that coming, and I'm really glad that he didn't answer it the way that I originally had thought. But now that this such and such thing has happened, I'm really thankful that he worked it out this way. I wouldn't have seen that or wanted that.
Right, absolutely.
And here we are. Yep. And so actually that leads me into another thing, which is if we're wanting our vision change, if we want to have that be the essential piece of the puzzle that helps us to rely on hope and promises and God's trustworthiness versus our vision being focused in the minutia of the things that are going on, then we need to know God's promises and who he is. So we've already said this. One of them I'll bring into light right now, which you're just talking about, that his ways are not our ways, right? So Numbers 23:19 says, God is not a man that he should lie, right? His nature is not that of a liar, nor is he like the son of a man, so another human type, that he should change his mind. He doesn't change his mind. But it says, does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? These are rhetorical. Of course, he promises and fulfills, right? He is the one that is faithful, that keeps his commandments and his covenants. And then Psalm 145:13, the Lord is trustworthy in all that he promises, and he's faithful in all that he does. So it's just nice to have these things if you're going through a season of turmoil, to find your truth and anchor it into what God says in his promises, because he is trustworthy. He's worthy of your trust.
Right.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking of as we, through this and as we're talking, is I think there's a perspective shift that needs to take place when we talk about God. I think religion of all kinds, I'm not going to pick on one, because I think they've all done it at times. I think religion has created this image of God like he's up there just waiting for a reason to zap you.
Right.
Like he's just up there waiting, going, okay, you finally, right? And I think there needs to be a perspective shift that's foundational, and that is that this idea that God is for us, he's not against us. And I get this from John 10, plus just the meta-narrative of Scripture. Yeah. And that is, I've come to bring life and life abundant. That doesn't sound like someone's like, I really can't wait to punish these people, right?
Right.
And I think about it with, this past weekend was my birthday, and we had all the kids and grandkids over and all that stuff. And I, as a dad, at my best, I really want for all my kids and all the very best, right? But every now and again, I have to correct. Not because I'm mad at them, not because I take pleasure in upsetting them, but because I want what's best. I want the very best. And I think sometimes, even when we talk about promises, I think it's against this backdrop. But God is up there and he ultimately wants to zap me. Yeah, but God is this guy up there that just is looking for, he knows every bad thing about me. Yeah, but no, God's for you. He wants the very best for you. He wants to work all things out to the good for those who believe and trust him. He wants to bring you life and life abundant. He does not want death. He does not want sorrow. He does not want that. So I think if we shift what our perception of God is, all of a sudden the promises take on a whole new life.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, one thing that you mentioned I think is very fitting for what we're talking about, and that is that our human weakness is actually quite important to recognize, that maybe even in our fatherhood, we try to do things in a perfect way, or we try to do things to the best of our wisdom at that time. But what we need to realize is that God, our Heavenly Father, is actually perfect, and His strength and His grace are made perfect or made manifest. We're able to see His strength and His grace on display, especially in our weaknesses. So we need to come to the realization that our weaknesses are real, and we don't really need all the details all the time, because God's the one who has all that in control.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we beat ourselves up when we come face to face with our weakness. You know, the other thing that I noticed in here, or that wasn't in here, is Abram doesn't, there's no commentary in here like, and Abram was really upset with himself, and he went and hid by himself because he knew he totally screwed up, and now he feels like a loser. And like, sometimes when we fail, when we come face to face with our weaknesses, man, we beat ourselves up. And I think God's going, dude, I get it. I know, I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for recognizing the failure. Now we can learn from that, but it doesn't have to derail you.
Yeah, that is so true. In that derailing, are we not in a way compromising what is true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because God said He's going to work it out for the good for those who believe and trust in Him. And sometimes we go, well, yeah, but not right now. I mean, this was a doozy. Right?
Yeah. I found the one loophole of that. Yeah.
This is the one time you can't work it out, God.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so what we're seeing, though, is that when we are in times of weakness and we compromise the truth like Abram did, other people are affected by our actions. Our actions follow the compromise. Lives are affected by this.
Yeah. When we start compromising the truth, and honestly, in our culture today, truth compromises all over the place. And when we compromise the truth and we start living our lives in that compromised state, if you will, it affects other people.
Yeah.
I mean, last week with what happened with Charlie Kirk and the anniversary of 9/11, we see what happens when people compromise the truth of the value of human life.
Right.
And they act according to that compromised truth. Other lives are affected.
Yep.
And so, yeah, we have to realize our weakness is real. We have to understand that that's where it is. We have to not compromise on the truth, because the way we operate, we don't operate in a bubble. I don't just go through this life and the only person that's affected by my decisions and the way I operate is me. No, it affects Kathy, my wife. It affects my children. It affects the people I work with. It affects the people on the road. It affects everybody that I enter into life with, which is everyone. It affects their lives, my decisions.
Yeah. And if you want to put even more of a burden on yourself, but it even affects those that you could have come into connection with, but because of the compromise earlier, you then have disqualified yourself or maybe chosen a different route from what would have been otherwise.
This just came to me. I don't know who this person was. I never met this person before, but I had to drop a car off at a place to get serviced, right? And so I drop it off, and they call me, and it's done. So I get the ride, I go over there. And I'm waiting for my car to be brought back around, right? So as I'm waiting there, there's this other lady that she is visibly upset. Like she's like just talking out loud to anybody and everybody, right?
Just venting it out.
Oh, just spewing it out there. And so she goes and she says, that's it, I'm sitting in this chair. So she goes, she sits in one of the service advisor's chair. And my service advisor, that was his chair. So I'm like,
yeah, sorry, man.
I don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
So another service advisor comes up and says, hey, can I help you? And this person was like, yes, this is ridiculous. And he says, well, what is ridiculous? I have and she gave the time, appointment. And that was, I've been out there for half an hour. And he says, well, I'm really sorry, but you'd pull the car in here. Well, I've been sitting out there and no one's come out to talk to me. And she was, and I mean the whole place. And so my service advisor comes in, parks my car, gets out, sees all this. And he said, oh, this is going to be fun.
Right.
But just that right there, right? That little snapshot. How many people did that person's mode of operation affect? Did it affect the one guy that now had to come and and he's now pulling her car in, and this advisor's now like, oh, now I got to go interact with this. Just how many people that one little act did. And so, I think there's a lot of weight on that to understand, guess what? I don't live in a bubble.
Right.
How I respond to you, how I respond to other people does affect other people's lives. It doesn't mean I have to be perfect, but I have to be honest about my weaknesses. I have to then be quick to ask for forgiveness and own my weaknesses, so that when I do cross a line, when I do fail, I can come to a person and say, hey, that was a failure, but I'm not a failure. That just means I failed in that moment.
Yep. Right there, that's a beautiful segue to your final point of this sermon, to be able to display that humility to others allows for God's grace to be then displayed as a response from the other person, as well as in your own humility. If you then approach God for whatever that thing is and humbly ask for forgiveness or for his strength or for his mercy or whatever the case is, again, that allows his grace to prevail, showing more of his steadfastness, by the way, more of his faithfulness to even a people who have a tendency to run away or turn the other direction. Yeah. And so it is beautiful that God's grace actually protects us even in our failures.
Yeah, and Abram was protected. I mean, he failed, but yet, wow, Sarai, I mean, she could have been abused. Right?
Yeah.
She could have been brought into this situation and been abused. And then even when the plagues hit, Pharaoh could have been we saw Pharaoh get really mad with plagues, right?
Yeah.
That comes later.
Yeah.
Pharaoh could have been mad and could have killed Abram anyway, but instead Abram gets all this stuff, and he says, all right, take all the stuff and leave. And hey, good thing we didn't abuse Sarai, because I could have really been in trouble because of that. And, and so, yes, there's this protection, and even inside the protection, the provision.
Yep.
I mean, we had talked about heading into that Sunday, we talked about the fact that Abram leaves Egypt with more stuff than when he went to Egypt.
Yep, the same as the Israelites many years later doing the same exact thing. Yep, going back out into the wilderness. Yeah, and well, then of course, then you have the final runner of that, which is Jesus coming out of his time in Egypt, and and so on. A light is shining. Yes, I do want to give another another couple verses here about God's promises, and hopefully they are inspiring and encouraging to those listening. Hebrews 10:23. I like this one. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, for he who promised is faithful. So there is a reason for hope, because again, he is steadfast, he is faithful, he is the one who made the promises. Another one, Isaiah 41:10. I love this one. It's do not fear, for I am with you. I will strengthen you and I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. There's power in that right hand, and there's right standing in that right hand. And of course, Philippians 4:19. And my God will meet all of your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. And the riches of his glory and what he has available for anyone is bigger storehouses than anyone could ever even imagine. Who is it that knows how the snow comes and all that sort of stuff? And so yes, God's abundance is far more than our imagination.
And you referenced the storehouses. When we did this in Family on Mission, one of the people said one of their promises that they comes out of Malachi 3:10, talking about the tithe, bring the full tithe, and see if I don't open up the storehouses. We have this sense that like God needs our money, or God needs our time, or God needs our he doesn't I don't care I don't care if you're Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, any of these people that think they got a lot of money, right? And according to us, they do. But that's a mere vapor in God's economy. He doesn't need our money.
Right.
What he wants is us to trust in his promises, to trust in his provision, and trust that he's going to take us to where he wants us to be. And that's the promise that we can rely on no matter what we run into.
That's right. And that's a great closing statement for our episode here of episode 36 of the Well Overflow podcast. We're then going to be looking forward to this next week, which is September 21st. The title of that particular sermon is Promise Demands Patience.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So if we're already talking about not needing to know all the details and God working on a different timeline as us, yeah. In fact,
I need to find another speaker for that because patience is not one of my strong suits.
I've got a verse that's just along those lines. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some may understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance.
Yeah.
So different time.
I guess when you back it up against eternity, a couple years is not
Right.
a long time.
Or even 40 years.
Or even 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
Even
exactly.
generations.
That's right. So if you guys want to get a little bit ahead in the reading for this coming weekend, get into Genesis 16. That's where we're going to be focusing this coming Sunday.
Great.
Yep. Well, that's it for today's podcast episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Jeff Waterman, for the conversation.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great day.